Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Guile here, and welcome back to the Forged Alliance Forever promotional series Saturday afternoon special, winging its way to you from the sunny climes of Britain's south coast. The sun is out, ladies and gentlemen. It's very exciting. It happens about 4 times a year here in the UK, which means spring has sprung, the birds are tweeting, the dogs are barking, and gamers like myself are indoors making sure they don't die of vitamin D exposure. Very exciting stuff. I promised I would get a second cast to you out this week, and here it is, and it's going to be a ladder match a couple of minutes shy of epicosity, ladies and gentlemen. So it's going to be a longer match, but it's not going to suffer, hopefully, from the sim speed slowdown that you get from the epic 4v4, 5v5, or the seconds matches, those kinds of things. So hopefully it should run in reasonably good fashion throughout, and it's all going to go down on Emerald Crater. So let's go on over to the game zone and see how these guys are going to get on. So Emerald Crater, we were here a couple of weeks ago for the Zoc special second game, Zoc versus Blackheart. What a game this that was. Hopefully this will live up to that as well. And while we're talking about Zoc, I don't know if any of you happen to see his Plays of the Month video that went out a couple of days ago. It makes me smile. It was a great video, absolutely fantastic. It makes me smile because he's been on about doing one of those, or doing a series of those, since about 2013. He actually wanted to get me involved back in the day, but I have just always been too busy, and I'm thrilled to see that he's managed to get it together. Hopefully he's going to make it a regular thing. If you haven't seen it, go see it, guys. Very, very cool. And if you're incredibly lazy and desperately need a link to that, and you're of the same kind of ilk as me, then yell at me and I will put a link in the description below this video. Very good stuff. Do go check it out. Let's take a look at our players today. Up here at the top in the blue corner is none other than Mad-Mozart. He's going Aeon, opening first land, and yes, Mozart, I will be putting the hyphen between your name. He was very upset, talking about it in FAF chat the other day, that FAF bot never pings him when people put exclamation mark casts into FAF. Bring up that cast list from FAF bot. It usually pings the people who are featured on there, and I've always forgotten to put the hyphen between his name, and he's always missed out. So I'm rectifying that today. You shall have your hyphen, sir, so you won't feel left out. Great to have him here once again on Guilecast. Let's take a look at his opponent down here at the bottom in the red corner. It's none other than Pachuriko. He's had an accident and gone Cybran, opening first land, going second air, and then going third land. But did I see a super early lab? In fact, a whole bunch of them coming out from Mozart. Let's take a look at where these chaps are heading, all to different corners of the globe. The 2 midpoints, or intermediary points, either side, and one more or less heading to the bottom section of the central plateau. For those of you that haven't seen much on Emerald Crater before, do not be fooled. This is a dust bowl. There is no water on this map. It may at first glance look like they are islands, but they are simply hillocks, grassy knolls, if you will, amongst a sea of dirt. That is all we've got going there. So no navy in this one. It is going to be a land and air game. Air, of course, the advantage will be with our Aeon player, and it has to be said, I think land's probably the advantage with our Bricks, our Cybran player. So there we go. But we could have our first few shots fired here, and that is going to be between Mozart's lab. His flare there is going to take out Pachuriko's mole, leaving that poor little hunter to make his way up to the top without any intel whatsoever. ACUs are out from their main base, heading towards their intermediate positions on their way to their alternate expansions. Mozart's going east, Pachuriko going west, so we're not going to have any collisions of ACUs at the same midpoint sections here, which is always interesting to see. We have got engineers trundling their way on land to the bottom right and left corner there for Pachuriko. None so far for Mozart in the top hemisphere of the map. It's not a hemisphere because it's not a sphere, but you know what I mean, top portion of the map for Mozart. I'm wondering if he's going to be expanding using transport. Certainly not building any at the moment, focusing more on air defense. He's got a bomber over here, potentially to help defend that engineer, which could actually be in jeopardy soon, as that hunter is now making its way up to this portion of the map. He has got an Aurora in the area, though, should be okay, but that bomber has now been caught by one of Pachuriko's inties. Mozart brings in an intie of his own. I think he's going to get the better of that second exchange, but the bomber is down, so worth it as far as he's concerned. The hunter does get caught as well, so engineer survives, albeit just for the moment, moving northward to keep out of range of that potential hunter fire, but he seems to be doing okay for the moment. Pachuriko making his way to the intermediary position over there in the southwest, and we have a similar position up here in the northeast for Mozart, but in comes a bomber for Pachuriko. That's going to kill the engineer and of course all of the build orders that have been queued up there. And you'll have to let me know, guys, as well. I'm experimenting with a mini map on this one. Not all maps are worth using it on, mainly because I don't know, it always looks better when you've actually got the terrain backdrop in there, and some of the custom made maps don't have access to that. On the minimap you just have a blank canvas, a black screen with the units on. But we're going to try it for this, see if it helps little old Guile with his appalling attention spam to catch more of the gameplay, stop missing crucial stuff, as inevitably I do in almost every cast. And that is that early lab, I think, that we saw from Mozart has made its way right around the back, has one kill to its name so far, and is going to be successful, I think, in taking down one of those T1 mexes there. We'll see what that does to the eco. I think that's going to drop Pachuriko down to 19. Yes, it is, a Mad-Mozart on 23, so relatively close expansion-wise. That could be about to change as the engineers make their way up onto the rear plateaus. One of them being chased down, though, one of these labs with one kill to his name as well from Mozart. Heavily damaged, scurrying away as quickly as he can from a Mantis that's in pursuit, but he's trying to make his way to bear down on that engineer in the southeast. Few exchanges in the center now, and that's definitely going a little bit better for Pachuriko. Aurora's getting caught out there, not great up close and personal. The Auroras, you want to be using that range, of course, and be keeping them mobile. Always tougher on a map like this where there's so many areas of conflict going on. And that was a that was from the Aurora there. So PD not in place yet. Scout getting killed off there. But engineer safe for the moment, could be in position long enough to get that static defense in place. And there was a little bit of conversation at the beginning of this one as well between the two players. They were, or at least Mad-Mozart seemed to be pretty surprised about the selection of this map, which is weird. He was saying it must have been in Pachuriko's selection. Down goes that engineer. It must have been in Pachuriko's selection of maps from his pool, but the way I always thought it worked is I thought it tried to find maps that the two players had in common. I suppose it's entirely possible that these two players had selected an entirely different set of 15 maps, however unlikely that is. But anyway, if someone wants to throw some light on that in the comment section below, that would be very welcome indeed. But Bomber's doing some good work dotted around the map for both these players. Engineers dropped off by transport. Their chariot drops off one of them just east of that eastern starting location, but interceptors from Pachuriko successful in shooting down that transport with at least two other engineers on board that kind of looked like they were heading down to the southeastern plateau, and that engineer survived down there, so we can only assume that that Mantis caught up with that lab. That could have been it right there. It does seem to be like the right kind of size and shape for a lab wreck, so nicely done there from Pachuriko. That is the Mantis with the one kill moving away as we speak. Landed interceptors in the center, not a great place to park your plane there. Pachuriko gets picked up by a couple of Auroras moving into the center, and now we have another roving band of Mantis, and this is always a problem with placing PD or a unit of T1 PD in this area. It's not difficult for units to skirt around the side. You take a look at the range on it. Yes, it seems like it covers it, but if you haven't got a radar installation in place, it's all too easy for your opponent to skirt around the outside of that. But he's not going to be successful in claiming that second mass extractor. Too many Auroras in place for him to do so, but has lost a single mex. Pachuriko pulling away somewhat though, and it has something to do, I think, with the part in fact that he has the 2 bottom corners, and Mozart as of yet has not expanded to the top corner, and he wants to get on it quickly because Pachuriko has expansionist ideals, although he is assuming that Mozart is already in place there. That is an assault squad. There are no engineers on board that skyhook, so he's going to get there and find nothing as yet to kill. He wants to probably think about getting some engineers up there if he can. A couple of mechs is taken out on the western starting location. Pachuriko bringing in Mantis to shoo away those Auroras, and immediately gets back to work reconstructing those T1 mechs with his ACU. So both ACUs in place on the 2 side islands here in the center. I know, as we said, they're not really islands, but I suppose can they be classified as islands even if they're not surrounded by water, even if this is a kind of a dust bowl? Any geography majors would do well to answer me before I come and find you and burn your house down. So aggressive and unnecessary. I would just like to know the answer to that. That's probably a better way of saying it. But another mech's threatened there from Pachuriko. That's going to go down. This would be a nice target of opportunity, the radar here, but I'm wondering if he's actually seen it. He will have seen it now, but Mozart's ACU far too powerful for those Mantis to be able to do anything about. So look, we've got Mantis dropped up at the top right. We've got Mantis and a mole over here at the top left. And now we've got another skyhook inbound, and I'm wondering if that has build capacity on it. And indeed it does. So Pachuriko taking advantage of the fact that Mozart has not extended to the far corners on this one. Mozart's still keeping pace relatively well, considering though he hasn't got access to those 2 corners. 43 to 49 in favor of Pachuriko. Let's take a look at the early reclaim figures. Not a lot of reclaim on this map, of course, though. You're basically, well, kept down to trees, which give you virtually little or no mass, and of course any wrecks that you can get your hands on belonging to what was your own units, or of course your opponents. 350 mass reclaimed so far for Pachuriko. Mad-Mozart on 244. So I mean, there are plenty of mass points on this map, but they're quite spread out and in core locations, these starting locations here, here, and here, and of course these rear plateau sections and the center. So although there's a lot of space to skirt around, and keeping any kind of coherent front line together on this map is an absolute nightmare, it does also mean that a lot of the action is centered around key spaces. So it's a very strange map compared to most of the other maps that are out there. But anyway, T1 bomb is now harassing the ground spam up here, and there are no sky slammers to speak of. This could be a crucial bomb if it lands in the right place. I thought it was going to land on top of the skyhook there, but it doesn't quite make it. Most of what's left from those forces has been collected and are now going to be dropped just behind Mad-Mozart's main base. Build capacity has landed up here and has managed to produce a land factory. What he really needs to do, though, is get some anti-air in place. Look at this wave of T1 bombers coming in. And we also have a chariot with 3 units of build capacity belonging to Mozart coming in from the west as well. First few mechs is now being picked up for Pachuriko. We'll come back to all this in just a second. A little bit of harassment happening over in the far west. A band of about 5 Auroras, but they're getting closed down now by Pachuriko's ACU. Takes out the first 3 with relative ease. Also a little push down here in the east. Lots of transporting going on for Pachuriko. Very nice work indeed. And the bomber harass has focused on that factory. I'm surprised they haven't taken out the radar. It is well over here, but you still want to be able to cut down as much of your opponent's field of vision as possible. Another one up here harassing those units up front. And did he only drop 1 engineer off, or did the others get killed? Either way, he only has 1 engineer in the area. But this is good solid work from Mozart, not allowing Pachuriko to grab these extra 6 mexes, because on a map like this, there's a lot of mass that he cannot afford to yield to his opponent. Now a little push happening over in the east. 1 unit of build capacity is about to die. His name was Kenneth. Very, very sad indeed. He had a delicious secret which he shall take with him to the grave that no one shall ever know about. Lots of T1 bombers in the center, meanwhile, for Mozart, hovering over the top of Pachuriko's forces that are looking pretty dominant down here in the center. And he's got a nice mix of Medusas entering the fray as well, which will help him coming up against these random installations of T1 PD that are dotted around now. But his main issue is going to be from air attack, and with that in mind has produced a reasonably large amount of T1 inties to deal with it. Current mass figures still have Pachuriko in the lead, 65 to 51, and now we're getting probably what is the first major air battle of this game so far. Definitely seems to be going a little bit better for Mad-Mozart. Pachuriko left with only a handful of inties in the middle. The important thing is, though, that the bombers have been neutralized. That allows the ground forces to go mano a mano. That is definitely what Pachuriko wants right now. Band of 6 Auroras need to be moved back in on this one, but we've got another event happening down here at the intersection here between the east and southern starting locations. And we also have T2 gunships in play from Pachuriko. Renegades wailing away on these T1 land units, but they don't last too long. That air force from Mozart dispatched and packed more than enough punch to be able to neutralize them. So T2 air from Pachuriko, is that matched? It is matched. So we've also got T2 air from Mozart, so no tech advantage really between these two players as yet. And forces moving in from Mozart. Nice bombing run as well. There is Pachuriko's ACU, so he has moved back to the midpoint down here. But we have got a unit of T1 PD, another one on the way, and no T1 artillery left there in that grouping for Mozart, so he should be successful in holding on to it. This intersection down here is neutralized now. This is good work from Mozart. Pachuriko trying to counter with gunships, but is low on air control. Interceptors hovering over the main base for Mozart, presumably attempting to shoot down anything that comes out of that air factory, but is now taking a lot of unnecessary tracer fire. As a result, once noticed, pulls that out. But interestingly, for a moment there, Mad-Mozart was ahead. It was 71 to 69 in favor of Mozart, and then he jumps ahead again. So it really is in flux right now. The advantage that was there has been wiped up. Mozart has assumed control of these two rear plateaus back here and has overrun the section down here, and now potentially stands to threaten the main base down here for Pachuriko, and that might be why Pachuriko has withdrawn his ACU, but he does have the ability potentially to cut off this band from retreat. In fact, he's split his forces now. He's only going to send a portion of these down to intercept this continuous wave of troops heading southwest for Mozart, and then he changes his mind, so he's lost some timing on that. He's going to send that back. Don't know whether that was a mistake or he literally just changed his mind. Chariot's still airdropping units down here, one of which is an engineer. He's got a lot of mass to scoop, and of course those 3 mexes to pick up. Whether or not he's going to be able to hold on to that, I don't know, but we do now have T2 land units on the field for Pachuriko. Rhinos rolling out and carving their way through the stationary T1 units. There does finally succumb to the pressure, but took out a good 6 or 7 tanks there. Major bomber attack, meanwhile, at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Decent splitting, though, of tracer fire. Means that it's not a great place for T1 air units to hover around. Only 1 mechs was taken out in that one, but a lot of build capacity under pressure. Potentially, no, he's dropping on the mechs instead. Almost feel like build capacity would be a better target at this point in time, any mexes will be instantly rebuilt with the amount of engineers that are down there. But on map control, starting to look a little bit like this one is swinging in Mozart's favor. He's certainly ahead on mass. I think we're starting to see something in the region of about a shift to around 55% of map control in favor of Mozart. Might be a bit of a game changer. These T2 land units that are rolling out in this direction now. More engineers airdropped in, this time from Pachuriko. Will be wanting to secure this ASAP, but is taking further fire almost immediately. Quick reclaim deals with one of them. There's still another one further back, and now only one engineer remains. These gunships need to be given an order to deal with, but now Mozart's attack shifts to the other side of the map, the far western island. Spectres going straight after the mexes now, having dealt with any anti-air on the field. Down they go, extending Mozart's lead now, 89 to 74. But Rhinos making their way up here as well now. Spectres doing their best to deal with them before any more T1 units get caught out. Spectre going after the autogun rather than the engineer. That was definitely down to a lack of attention on Mozart's part. His concentration elsewhere on the map. Swiftwinds now coming in to deal with these renegades. First one down, second one about to go down as well. And Pachuriko's air factory actually paused at the moment, and it's because he's having power issues. Only just jumping up to a similar level of power generation to Mad-Mozart now that he's got that T2 or second T2 power gen online. 1.7k a piece between these two guys. Let's take another look at the reclaim figures now that the game has progressed slightly. We're beyond the 21-minute mark now, and 4,000 mass banked for Mozart. Pachuriko on 10.5. So while Mozart is ahead slightly on generated mass, Pachuriko has pulled in a lot more in reclaim. Another mex goes down there for Pachuriko, and Mozart looking like he's threatening to evict Pachuriko from the entire central section. There's a lot of Aeon firepower that's concentrated in the middle of the map, and what I like about that is, of course, it is the shortest route to any other area. Allows, or would allow, Mozart to apply pressure quickly and equally to any of the points around this section of the map, not least, of course, as well allowing him to control another 8 mexes, which on this map is quite a substantial amount of mass. Dragonfly T2 transport laden with Mantis now making its way northwards. Let's see where it's headed. Well, it's going for the far eastern island. Mozart, of course, still sitting in that section with his ACU. Down go the Mantis. That's a lot of firepower for one transport to drop. But what's really nice from Pachuriko is we've had a couple of Rhino drops, so one of them has already destroyed just about everything on the ground at the top right, and another one at the top left has just gone down. However, this one's slightly better defended. All sections around the T1 PD keeping that alive. And Spectres finally dispatched to deal with those rhinos. This empty dragonfly looking like it's coming to evac, but I don't know if it's going to be able to pick them up in time. And in fact, orders have been cancelled for that one. One solitary rhino in the midpoint between the north and the eastern islands here for Mozart. Those mexes out of commission. So 24 minutes gone, and actually very little to choose in terms of eco between these two guys. Really not a great deal going on. Of course, curse of the commentator the moment I mention it, and the mass totals diverge, but generally these two have been pretty close. Mozart reclaiming one of his destroyed mexes up at the back there. And now we are only just starting to see some T2 land units from Mozart closing in on the midpoint down here between the south and eastern starting locations. Those obsidians, so very dangerous. Of course, they need to be careful. EMP from the Medusas can really cripple even the strongest armies. No micro there from Mozart, meaning those units not difficult to tackle there for Pachuriko. Looks like Pachuriko could be posturing for an attack on the other midpoint up here as well. Medusa's going in first. And T3 land units now in play for Mad-Mozart. The first few Harbingers enter the game. How does that compare to Petrick? Well, he's on his T2 HQ upgrade, and that's about to complete any second now. So again, no major tech advantage to these two players. They're both upgrading at almost identical speeds. Eruptor about to go down, but all Mozart has to do is issue a move command for those Harbingers that have recently been dropped in by that T2 transport. Once again, attention elsewhere. This is one of the worst maps for it, for ladder-sized games. Renegades getting caught out by large numbers of inties from Mozart. Although Pachuriko does have his own air force in the area, and now we get a pretty large air engagement kicking off between these two guys. All reinforcements coming in from Pachuriko. Of course, all of this is happening very much closer to his air production facilities, so he has the advantage of reinforcing quickly. A few more coming in from both players, so the air war continues. Rhinos on the ground, rolling up against this band of T1 that's coming in from Mozart. Doesn't want to have any part of it though, it's far too many Auroras. It looks like that was only a very minor victory in the air for Mozart in the end. Both players lost a significantly large portion of their T1 air force, but Mozart won't be too unhappy about it. He's predominantly producing swift winds now anyway, I would imagine. Going straight after those renegades that are trying to make a cheeky little attack at the top right, but another drop has cost Mozart those 3 T1 mexes once again. Skyhook up at the top, getting killed off. No doubt another drop that was unsuccessful at the top left. Just as we saw the Harbingers move to the northwestern midpoint a moment ago, here are some bricks that have been moved to the southeastern midpoint. And once again, Pachuriko needs to move them into the potential fire zone. It's a lot of T2 units massing, waiting for an attack. Pachuriko really putting the gunships to work. But at the same time, it's a lot of mass that he's just kind of littering on Mozart's side of the field. Again, not a great deal between these two players, and as soon as I say it, they jump to 160 apiece. Generated mass, let's take a look at reclaim though. 21,800 mass for Pachuriko, 14,000 for Mad-Mozart. So the advantage was gained early and on the reclaim, and now they seem to be accumulating at about the same kind of rate, more or less. The Renegade nailed by swift winds and prevented from finishing off that T1 mech, which is going to survive on just 20 hit points. But finally those Obsidians do move in on the midpoint. There's an awful lot of T1 PD, but more importantly 2 bricks standing guard. And having realized it, Mad-Mozart is going to withdraw what units he has left. From that, they were successful in taking down one of the T1 PDs, but another 3 remain. But what's important is that Mozart has been prevented from securing the central island. He's still going after the odd mechs here and there. But this kind of warfare, for a player, it's just so draining. Constant rebuilding of mexes here and there, the constant harassment while harassing yourself. That's why I don't really play ladder, and it's a shame because it's the only way you actually improve at this game, really properly improve. One Harbinger there to survive. 3,200 hit points remain. 2 of the mexes taken down. Land factories, air factories wiped out. Those 2 those 2 bricks unable to protect that facility at the bottom there. But another drop coming in from Mad-Mozart. Harbingers dropped off in the center. Successful in tandem with the Renegades at stopping that Rhino attack. Loyalists in play now for Pachuriko, and it's quite a shrewd move, I guess. You might think, well, the other person's spewing out harbs, so I'm just going to go brick production all day. But remember, the Loyalists are faster. This is very much a game of attrition, trying to wear down your opponents, trying to take out as many mexes as you can, as quickly as you can. So Loyalists actually much more efficient than bricks at that. Another little drop with a couple of deceivers there as well, but it's been spotted nice and early. Some sort of air attack is probably preferable to deal with it now. There are no teched up units on the ground at all here. There are 3 units of T1 PD. Brick ignores those and goes straight after the land factory. Those wall sections just so good at protecting the low profile T1 point defense. And that brick somehow manages to skirt out of range with about 250 HP remaining, and Mad-Mozart asking his opponent there to stop killing all the mexes. Well, that's kind of the point. Goes back to what I was saying earlier, just how draining this map is to play, and it really is. It's hard even to commentate on sheer quantity of stuff going on. It rivals the larger team player games. It's the sheer quantity of harassment, and in comes that brick once again. Managed to kill one of the T1 PDs, utilizing its range very nicely indeed. And a bit of regen now that it's started up as well. And down goes the other one. More build capacity alive back here though, producing more point defense though. Probably wants to think about moving further back and getting another factory together, but a couple of bricks around the back of Mad-Mozart's base. Going to get caught out by 3 harbs. Sorry, they're not bricks, they're actually loyalists. Notice that the moment their health started evaporating as quickly as it did, but look at the strap bombers now on the field. So Mozart transitioning to T3 air. They've been keeping up the whole way, and he's announced as much that he's at T3 by flying a spy plane over the top of Pachuriko's base. Pachuriko already on an upgrade there for his T3 air factory at 75%, but where are those strap bombers going? It looks like they're coming straight for the main base. Pachuriko's ACU is under shield coverage, so should be able to survive a pass or two. And of course, the moment I say it, wanders outside of shield coverage, and those bombers look like they're coming straight for him. Indeed they are. First few bombs impact on the shield. The ones that do get through drop just short, and now a horde of T1 inties are on their tail. They can't catch those strap bombers unless they turn, but a single ASF will be successful at closing the gap. In come the swift winds there from Mad-Mozart, but so massively outnumbered they are, they're not going to be able to ward off that air force. Another strap bomb away. No, not even managed it. So that horde of strap bombers doesn't get a second pass in. There are more strats coming out, but now we have bouncers on the field. T3 mobile anti-air, which will help keep this base safe. Pachuriko is spamming together basic shield gens, and I think he's done all he needs to do to safeguard his ACU. Mad-Mozart probably wants to think about changing tack, and if he is going to continue to harass the main base, going after some of the power or some of the build capacity or something, all of those bombs landing on the shields and firing for no discernible effect whatsoever. Major intel fail though. Look at this. One brick with 900 HP sitting in front of a much larger army, just wailing away. Mozart issuing the order to advance, and finally they move into visual range and are able to deal with them. But a strap bomber comes out to avenge that brick. So Pachuriko now producing strats as well. He's going to lose that T2 factory, won't be too upset about it. He'll be sorry to have lost the 3 mexes at the midpoint though, but a beautiful strap bomb there tidies up a large number of those units. Another air engagement over at the northeast. Inti's getting shredded there for Mad-Mozart, who's now trying to produce more power, help sustain more air production, presumably. Brick caught out by 3 harbingers. And Pachuriko has the luxury for the moment to just hover over the top of Mad-Mozart's base, try and pick off any air units as they're produced. Mozart immediately starts producing a transcender with his ACU. That T2 transport's going to get shot down. Those engineers aren't going to make it to their destination. But look at this. A whole band of loyalists coming in from the west. We've also got strap bombers harassing the eastern starting location down here. with no anti-air on the ground to deal with them, and that's a lot of stacked up Harbingers as well that are under threat. But look at this incursion. T3 Mexes, core T3 Mexes under pressure now. This could make a big difference to the outcome of this game. Mad-Mozart just drops behind Pachuriko in generated mass now. Another T3 Mech succumbs. Harbingers are brought in from all directions, so I think it's only going to be those two Mexes that die off, but that drops Mad-Mozart down to below 200 mass per tick on generated mass. Down go the Loyalists. And look at this. That is really painful indeed. Major strap bomb attack. That was a pretty highly developed base as well. It's been occupied and secure for a lot longer than this base on the other side belonging to Pachuriko. So that is going to feel pretty good for our Cybran player. Harbs versus bricks usually doesn't go too well for the Harbingers. They're actually faring okay at the moment. Looks like a pretty even exchange. Wondering if there has been some alteration to Harbingers while I've been away that I've not been aware of. But 248 to 171 in favor of Pachuriko. That is now a sizable and meaningful mass advantage in this one. Coming up to the 40-minute mark. Pachuriko is now definitely in the ascendancy. Restorers in production for Mozart, who has started work on a GC. That is the first land-based experimental we have seen so far. I'm wondering if we're getting anything on this side of the border. Not so much, at least not in the main base at any rate. But so much assorted T3 kicking about the place. Another drop up there to the top right and another one up there to the top left. Mozart has had a dreadful time of late trying to contain these drops from Pachuriko, who is just littering the map with bricks now. Strap bomber comes in, goes straight after the T3 mobile anti-air, takes two of them out and takes a large chunk of health out of that quantum reactor as well. In comes a whaler, but he's not going to make the point of attack. Those transcenders, four of them dotted around Mad-Mozart's comm, who has nearly completed that Colossus. 90,000 hit points out of 100k. Wondering if we're going to see a reactionary experimental started down here for Pachuriko. Not as yet. And there's a lot of harbs though over in the west, and there's not a lot to stop it. We've got dots of dotted about bricks and loyalists. Usually doesn't work out too well when put up against formations of units, but crucially Mozart lacking any kind of intel on this side of the map at all, so if it's out of the field of view he is unable to return fire. Pachuriko taking full advantage of that, skirting around the edge of its view range. That's going to be juicy. Strap bomber in, going straight after that assisted T3 factory and killing a good chunk of engineers there. That strap bomber with 35 kills to his name already. And there's another 3 or 4. What happened to that GC? Where has it wandered off to? Well, it's heading south. Have we got a an endpoint. It is heading straight for Pachuriko's main base. The problem being, of course, is the amount of air pressure that Pachuriko's been piling on. Mad-Mozart really needs to win an air engagement. He doesn't want to be starting it over the top of Pachuriko's mobile anti-air. Line of loyalists needs to be called back, and indeed he manages to do that. Not going to be effective at all going in one at a time against the GC. And we have a strategic missile launcher under construction now for Mozart, under his first and only shield dome in that main base. That could make life interesting if Pachuriko doesn't discover it in time. But look at the mass differential now between these two players. 367 versus 212. That is enormous. But still, I was about to say still no experimental, but there is one. A megalith just jumping past the 25% mark as it goes into the yellow. Does Pachuriko have a lot of built-up mass, or if he did, it's been used. But still building at a pretty reasonable rate. He's got a lot of build capacity on it and a pretty healthy income. GC still a ways off the main base. I think it's fair to say that megalith will be operational long before it gets there. GC though with 42 kills will have some veterancy. But I shouldn't think that should change the outcome of any engagement between the two. Another drop prepared around the back, but not yet given orders. Those harbingers closing down, going to be successful at killing off the dragonfly. And should now be able to kill the brick as well. That nuke launcher was completed incredibly quickly, and Mad-Mozart piling on the build capacity to get that missile completed. Looks to be around about 30% done already. Have we got any kind of strategic missile defense? Well, it's been spotted. I'm wondering if that has actually been spotted. Well, he's noticed the structure from intel and the amount of build capacity massing around it, and he's rightly guessed what that's going to mean. So that is a good response from Pachuriko. My only concern for him is he's not got any build capacity assisting him whatsoever. He's instead working on a bug now that that megalith has been completed, and I'm wondering if that is going to get a missile in it in time, with Mad-Mozart prioritizing that nuke the way he is. I suggest it's probably not going to manage it. 57 kills for that Colossus so far. The T1 bombers come in to add a little extra damage. Corsairs and a few whalers as well. 1 star of veterancy on that GC. Mad-Mozart happy to try and pick off the whaler, and Corsairs doesn't want to get too close to the actual base section. We've got a few traces in here, and of course that horde of ASFs belonging to Pachuriko as well. Doesn't need to do too much in the way of air cover. GC should be able to handle what's on the ground at the moment. Build capacity frantically trying to throw together Cerberus turrets as best they can. Pachuriko deciding not at the moment to control K that build capacity. He's just sitting there for the moment while the GC just mops up all the rest of the main structures in that base. And in fact, build capacity is going to remain and reclaim as much of those Cerberus wrecks as he can. Pachuriko not too concerned about the veterancy going onto that GC. He's got a megalith coming in now. He's pretty sure he can deal with it. Right now, mass is the priority for him. So that is why he makes that decision. In comes the megalith. A couple more whalers. Not a great place for them to be, being as we've got a few redeemers coming in now to the west of the GC, but those two now locked in mortal combat, and it's going to be pretty obvious, I think, who is going to succeed there. GC having taken a little bit of damage, veterancy or no, outmatched by the larger megalith. So that is going to be a win finally in the area for Pachuriko, who has though lost most of the structures in that area. Soul Ripper though is online, and that nuke very nearly ready. Mad-Mozart throwing absolutely everything on it. Another GC has been started, but construction abandoned for the moment while everything gets piled onto that nuke launcher. And is Mad-Mozart watching it as it completes? We shall know in just a second. There goes the launch command, and the nuke is away. And I'm wondering if this is going to be a game leveler between these two. Pachuriko on 150 mass, pretty much ahead of Mad-Mozart. Even if he takes out all three of those core T3s and the associated mass, that's not going to pick up that much mass. But if he can bottleneck enough on power, if he can kill enough of these T3 P-gens, could definitely cripple his opponent, who is air vacuuming his ACU out of the area as that nuke comes in. And that strategic missile defense was nowhere near completed. Build capacity trying to clear the area, but it's going to end up sitting most of it in the blast zone. But importantly, 3 of those P-gens remain, and even more importantly, in fact, as we take a look at the eco, it hasn't bottlenecked him on power, but also he had a large store of mass, and if he'd have killed those 4 mass storages, he would have lost a chunk of that, as his mass storage would have been exceeded by the amount of mass he was trying to store. So a little bit of luck there for him. He might not feel that way though. Eating a nuke rarely feels lucky in any way, shape or form. Build capacity immediately starting to try and repair the area. I'm astonished that landing that nuke directly on top of that mechs did not kill that one. He would have been better off. He was trying to create maximum amount of damage, but he might have been better off aiming it a little bit further this way and just getting rid of that. But either way, he's closed the gap on mass for the moment. What he really needs to do is work out somehow, if he's got any way of doing it, a way to assert control back over this rear plateau, and of course grab these as well. Of course, problem being is there is a megalith now walking towards his main base. And where is that Soul Ripper? It clearly completed. There it is. It's over on this side of things, and it has been seen as well because he's been attacking. 21 kills on that Soul Ripper already. And what are we doing in terms of the air game? Well, 61 ASFs for Mad-Mozart. Pachuriko on 55, so a slight advantage with him. Either way though, probably not enough if it gets embroiled in a large air fight to take down a Soul Ripper as well, especially not if it happens over the top of any kind of friendly anti-air, although there's not a lot of that left around here. Airdrops to the eastern island there for Mad-Mozart. Only T1 mechs to lose, but nonetheless never enjoyable. That megalith now bearing down on the main base. Still a lot of build capacity assisting that strategic missile launcher, trying to get another nuke ready. They're about 40-45% done on that second nuke. I would suggest to Mad-Mozart that a good plan would be to throw everything on that GC, but it might well be too little too late, as that megalith is closing the gap. Range, of course, on the megalith pretty extensive. And if I were he, I would be beelining for that nuke launcher. I wouldn't want to see any more of those in the game. Thank you very much. And that indeed looks like what he's aiming for. Restorers coming into play now, peppering that megalith, but down goes the shield. A couple of rounds into that nuke launcher, more than enough. Takes with it the assisting T3 Gen and a ton of build capacity in the explosion that follows. A huge chain reaction as it hits a row of energy storage as well. It's been pretty devastating, this attack, despite not really focusing on anything of any meaningful eco or economy or anything like that in the main base for Mad-Mozart. But Restorers should have enough punch to finish that megalith off, and importantly that GC will remain intact. Might have taken a few blasts, but as Pachuriko tries to withdraw that megalith, trying to keep that wreck as far away from safety as possible. Of course, Mad-Mozart will make a beeline for that with what build capacity he's got in the area, try and hoover it up as quickly as possible. Let's take a look at the latest reclaim figures. Well, 86,000 so far for Mad-Mozart and 112,000 for Pachuriko. So, massive advantage there. And now where are we up to on ASFs? And this is majorly important as we're starting to see an increased work rate for the Soul Ripper, which is closing down now on a group of Harbingers. Well, we're at 66 ASFs for Pachuriko and 61 for Mad-Mozart. However, we do also have a set of 15 Restorers, which significantly increase air-to-air firepower, but that's a lot of mass gone up in Harbingers there. Three Harbingers still alive. This little attack in the west, taking some T1 bomber fire, skirting around it quite nicely. Needs to kill off these two T2 mexes as well. Down goes one. Should manage to take down the other before the T1 bombers can kill them off. There it goes. Engineers now scooping the mass from that megalith, and astonishingly it's allowed Mozart to throw his strategic missile launcher back together incredibly quickly, and that GC is now almost complete as well. Still no attempt to even control the rear plateaus, and those have really been the deciding factors in this one. There's no two ways about it. Pachuriko has been sitting pretty comfortably in these two sections either side. He even has some pretty important structures, and worried about a nuke attack on the base down here. He even has an SMD in place. Missile not ready, but will be ready by the time Mozart has another nuke primed, and that main one, that main Guardian SMD in the base, very close to getting a missile as well. So even if Mad-Mozart is able to hold on to that nuke launcher, those are two targets he's not going to be able to pick unless he can take down those SMDs. Now getting a significant air battle developing up near Mad-Mozart's base. Mozart very light in terms of air power. Restorers now doing the majority of the work. Would love to drag Pachuriko's air force over the main base and in range of some of these transcenders. This is a huge advert for Pachuriko that he has air dominance now, and to break out the Soul Ripper. Mozart trying to save those T2 transports and get them out of the field of view. Unsuccessful though. And the Soul Ripper is moving in that direction. has them selected with the ASFs, I believe. Just the odd whaler sent to hoover up T1 Mexes on its way round. Mozart just not allowed to expand, as he hasn't been really for the last 15-20 minutes of this game. But Soul Ripper now inbound on the main base. We do have Transcenders. Mozart throwing up more of them. How many has he got in this area? He's got 7 SAMs, which will be prioritizing the Soul Ripper, which is down into the yellow, 70,000 hit points, but the shield collapses. Mozart throws up another one. He's out of range of the bubble, though. And that Soul Ripper very much prioritizing the ACU. Mozart scoots underneath shield coverage and starts another one. Soul Ripper moves further back, no doubt trying to grab some veterancy. Mozart recognizes the danger in control Ks. All of that build capacity. Needs to get another shield gen up if he can. That one is about to go down. And now Soul Ripper has free reign to engage the ACU once again. Mozart moves away, trying to avoid some of the fire. It's going to be very close indeed as the Soul Ripper goes into the red. Just a few thousand hit points left on him, but it's not enough. Mad-Mozart's HP runs out first and succumbs to the air pressure, almost on the nose of 58 minutes. Pachuriko says, tough game. Yes, indeed. That was certainly a tough game, but a very entertaining one. More like that, please, in the future, gentlemen. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. As always, more to come from me in the future. But in the meantime, stay well and stay safe. This is Guile, signing out.